Lots of people you hire right out of college, and they want to do different things. They want to try different things. They want to work on this for 4 months, for this for 4 months. And people with autism would rather do a smaller number of things and get great at them. Mm-hmm. So they'd rather get deep into them, understand the details, understand the special cases, understand how it works in different situations. And that's fantastic for anybody who's trying to learn a platform or a process or how to work with data, to really be the kind of person that wants to dig in on things and get to know them really well.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Today I'm here with David Friedman, who has a fascinating company that has a very overt social impact element to it. And I would love to hear the backstory from David. It's called AutonomyWorks, and it services the digital marketing and traditional marketing community, as well as I think some other sectors as well. So David, why don't you tell the story about AutonomyWorks and what was the catalyst for you starting it?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. Thanks for having me today. First, I'll give a little bit of my background. I'm old. I went to business school in the 80s, spent 10 years in management consulting, and then in the late 90s, got into the digital ad space and spent 11 years at Razorfish. Ultimately ran that business in the Americas. Left there and spent a couple of years running marketing at Sears, the big retailer. But that really doesn't have too much to do with the backstory for AutonomyWorks. I have a son, his name's Matthew, and he's 27 years old now, and he has autism. And when kids with autism, as they go through the school system, when they turn 14 and a half, the schools start a process. It's called transition planning, starting to look at what that kid's going to do after high school. And Matt's super talented, really good with numbers, really good with patterns, really good with structure, but probably wasn't going to be successful ultimately in a traditional college environment. Just doesn't have the social skills, the executive functioning to succeed there. But he's so good at all these things that my wife and I are like, there's got to be something for him to do. He's got all of these skills. When we started looking for what he could do, it was shocking. And the unemployment rate of adults with autism is around 80%. And many of them that are working in low skill jobs. They're cleaning tables, they're stocking shelves. They're not doing anything that taps into the skills and talents that so many people with autism have. Now, autism is a spectrum, so it expresses itself in very different ways in different people, but there is a significant subset of people within that spectrum that are really good at process, really good at detail, really good at with numbers. And so I said, well, there's got to be something here. And so I started in my business career talking to people, looking for jobs, asking what people might be able to do. And the penny sort of dropped for me when I was at Sears. We produced 90 million circulars a week. And believe it or not, we found 90 million newspapers to put them into and printed them out. And I had a couple hundred people on a production operation doing zone pricing, making sure that the fine print was accurate, making sure that all of the images were correct. And it was this repetitive process with people we go through every week. And I went down there one day and I'm like, Matt could do this. And I had the good sense not to get into the circular business. I realized that was probably not the future of marketing. But I realized we had the exact same problem when I was at Razorfish. We would hire smart people out of college. We would put them on ad ops, reporting tasks. They do it for a while, but invariably they would come to us 6, 9, if we were lucky, 18 months later and say, hey, done that enough? I'm either doing something else here or I'm doing something else somewhere else. And we turned that group over 50% a year. And that's a process where if you make mistakes, it can cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it was a very high value process. And so the idea behind AutonomyWorks kind of came out of that. We tap into the skills of people with autism to take on repetitive, detail-oriented tasks that exist across agencies and lots of other businesses.
So then you have to go into sales mode, right?
Yeah.
So and you have a sort of two-sided marketplace, right? So you have to sort of figure out, how do I get the people? Then how do I get enough stuff for them to do? And sort of how did you end up? Obviously, it's the same problem any agency has, right? Is how do you balance the supply and demand? So what was the journey there?
Yeah, we started the business back in 2013. And the first couple of years were really just piloting. We had a handful of clients that were all friends, 1 degree of separation kind of people, and a few people, and to try to understand what are the processes we need to do to hire people, how do we train them, how do we make them successful? Because I felt like if we didn't have a good, for lack of a better term, product to sell, that there wasn't anything to sell. So I wanted to make sure that the product was strong, that we were able to hire people and bring them in, train them, make them successful. How do we manage them? And that's really what the first probably 5 years of the business were focused on. And we built out a really good talent team, lots of connections in the marketplace with potential employees. We knew how to assess people, how to train them, how to onboard them, and how to make them successful. And so then we were in a position where, okay, now we can sort of really go to market and start to build the business. And the last 5 years have really been focused on what's the best type of work, how do we structure it, how do we work with clients, and now, you know, how do we scale the business? So this year we'll probably double the business, and I feel like we've got a really good trajectory going forward.
So a couple of questions relating to that. I mean, in the world of ad ops, whether it's display ad ops, video ad ops, social media, or search ad ops, right? You usually have to put QA in place, even if you've got the best possible person doing it. And I would imagine that you need the QA systems internally as well. So how did you sort of think about that in particular as you transition potentially from a place-based business, which you may have started out as, to potentially hybrid virtual, or did you remain place-based? Sort of how did you end up sort of adapting your processes for QA?
Right. That's I think that's a very important observation. And QA, I think, has to happen really at 2 different parts in the process. And that was one of the things we learned. You need to do QA basically before you do ad ops. And you need to make sure that traffic sheets are correct, that creative is correct, that everything operates and everything runs before you start to put it into the process. And then you need to do QA on the back end to make sure that tags got loaded properly, that things are launched, that things are counting. And what we found actually is that our highest value is at both ends of the process. So we have a client, they work, it's an agency, they have a global client, and that produces hundreds of campaigns a month. We review every single traffic sheet that gets produced by those markets all around the world, make sure that they're accurate, make sure they're correct before they feed into what they have an offshore ad ops team. So we QA it at the beginning, it goes to the offshore team, and they actually do the production part of it. So the client gets the best of both worlds. They get the quality by having it set at the beginning, and then they get the cost savings that you get when you use offshore. We have other clients where we do post-launch or optimization tracking, where when something launches, we're going out to make sure that it exists in the market and checking all of it at that end. And again, those seem to be the quality intensive places seem to be where we have our greatest impact and greatest value.
That's interesting. So are there any fun sort of specific human interest stories? I'm sure there are, with regards to folks that you've gone in and you know, maybe they were doing a menial job prior to joining AutonomyWorks, and now they're being realized to their fullest potential.
Yeah,
other than your son, obviously.
Yeah, well, my son. He was going to be one of my examples. But I think, you know, it's interesting. I think that if I were to look at the job that most of our associates had before coming to us, it's working in a grocery store, moving carts in the parking lot. You know, lots of grocery stores as a community service, hire people with disabilities to perform various jobs like that around the store. And obviously that doesn't tap into any of their sort of intellectual or analytical capability. And so we have a number of people. We have one guy who works, his name's Eric, and he's been with us for about 5 years. And before he joined us, he had looked for a job for 3 years. He's delivered hundreds of resumes and had essentially no interviews. He'd had a couple of volunteer jobs, and he came here and you know, we know now that has nothing to do with his capabilities. He worked significantly on some of the publisher ad ops work that we do, and he's become an expert in some of those platforms and tools. And it was just the matter of getting him into a role that he could succeed in. And he now takes he works in our office and he takes 2 trains. He lives in the city of Chicago, takes a train into the city of Chicago and then a train out to us in the suburbs every day, about an hour to an hour and a half commute each way to come work here. And when we went remote during the pandemic, just like everybody else did, he went remote and he worked from home during that period of time. And we gave him the option, because he had such a long commute, to stay and work at home. And he asked to actually continue to work in the office because he wanted to come back and where his friends were and where there were people that he knew and people that that supported him. And I think there's so many of those kinds of stories about how it changes people's perspective. And I think the big thing that it changes, and I'll talk a little bit about my son, is sort of the confidence and the belief in someone about what they can do. People with disabilities, a lot of time through their life, are talked to a lot about what they can't do and what they shouldn't do or what's not going to be possible for them. And at AutonomyWorks, we really focus on what they can do and what's possible. And when someone starts to come to work here, it starts to give them confidence in their ability to solve problems, confidence in their ability to interact with people, confidence in their ability to learn new things. And that translates into all of the different things around their lives. So my son, he started working here. He would get driven here every day. Either I or my wife would take him. But he wanted more hours and he wanted to work more. So he learned how to take public transportation. Now he walks from my house to the train, takes the train out here. He started going to the community college to take classes so he could get more hours on AutonomyWorks. So he takes a train and 2 buses to get to school and 2 buses and a train to get home. And it's just given him this belief now that he can do things that are hard and, a lot of hard things in life, and building that confidence that you can do hard things is really, I think, probably the biggest value we add for the people.
Yeah, those are great stories. It's interesting because, when you sort of talked about that, realization of untapped and unidentified talent, I actually think back to some folks I've hired over the years where I had to see past their social skills deficits, right? To see the sort of untapped brilliance that they had, because there are certain folks, particularly coders, but not necessarily exclusively coders, that I've hired over the years where they may have been on the Asperger scale somewhere, right? And so from a typical interviewing process perspective, it would be difficult for them to make it through an interview process. But yet once they felt comfortable in an environment and once they were working with their specific tasks at hand, they were brilliant, right? Often outperforming their peers significantly. And I think that's probably a lesson that can bridge out of AutonomyWorks into the regular HR departments who are perhaps not as interested in looking beyond what they see, on the cover of the book.
Right. And I think a lot back to my agency days, and I had a lot of creative directors that were exceptional at certain things, but not great at other things. And so we would build, I had a great creative director I worked with for many years who literally could not add 2 numbers. And so we built a system around her to make her successful. We focused her on what she was great at, and she was amazing, but she didn't enter her own time. She didn't do estimates of the budget. She didn't allocate resources because that wasn't what she was great at. It's the same thing with people with autism. If you can find the talent in what people are doing and you can kind of focus that in, you're going to get exceptional work out of it. One of the things that we found really useful is what I call it pursuit of mastery. Lots of people you hire right out of college, and they want to do different things. They want to try different things. They want to work on this for 4 months, for this for 4 months. And people with autism would rather do a smaller number of things and get great at them. So they'd rather get deep into them, understand the details, understand the special cases, understand how it works in different situations. And that's fantastic for anybody who's trying to learn a platform or a process or how to work with data, to really be the kind of person that wants to dig in on things and get to know them really well, because you build that knowledge over time of seeing different situations and having different experiences and interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like the way you set it up, it certainly benefits the dynamic of the in office work environment, benefits everybody because there's the social support element to it as well as the work support element to it. So I would imagine that it could hypothetically work in any metropolitan area. Had you had thoughts about potentially cloning it into New York or San Francisco or somewhere else like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What we're trying to do here in Chicago is to build what I call like a solution center or service center, a single location. I think it probably ends up being 75 or 80 people. We have about 50 people now, so getting up to 75 or 80 people. And I think that's a big enough unit that it can support its own trainer, it can have its own IT support, enough to be kind of self-sufficient. And then I think that's a replicable model that could be reproduced at any one of the top 25 markets around the country. You could do it in Atlanta, you could do it in New York, you could do it in Boston, you could do it in DC, you could do it in Philadelphia. Not just marketing markets, but lots of other markets who have different types of businesses, different types of transactional support. And our clients are around the world. So that's kind of the beauty of being in electronic or digital marketing, right? Is that you can work for people all around the world. So you could have an office in Philadelphia, and even though that city might not have a huge marketing business, you still have the ability to do the work from there for clients.
Great. So if there are folks who happen to be watching or listening to this and they've got open headcount in ad ops due to some churn, because again, some elements of ad operations, the typical person, as you indicated, feels like they've outgrown it, right? Whereas a lot of the folks that you've got on your team are actually happy to be very great at it and be great at that one thing. So what would the typical deployment be? So if some of them are listening and saying, actually, I should give David or his team a call because, we could use a little bit more throughput in ad ops, or we're having QA issues. What would be the typical engagement? Would they sort of start small and grow?
Yeah, typically we target, I'm getting to the point where we're going to have 3 to 5 people working with a client. That allows us to train multiple people on the work. It allows people to be able to exchange knowledge and expertise. It allows us to learn the client's terminology, the tools they use, the platforms they're in, all of that in a team. We typically start with smaller support. So what we would typically do is pick up one of their clients or one of their situations. Sometimes it's one platform, sometimes it's one client, sometimes it's one region, and pilot the processes there. We don't need detailed processes written out. All we want to do, we understand the basic processes. So all we want to see is to understand the sort of special cases about how the client does it. How do they use tags? How do they use different nomenclature? How are things named? And we can learn that just by having them demonstrate things. So we'll get on a video, they'll demonstrate the work, and we'll get started. And then we pilot that for 6 to 12 weeks, depending on how much process there is to develop. And then we incrementally add regions or clients or whatever over time to kind of build up to that 3 to 5 person team.
Great. So on your HR front, right? So are you primarily getting your applicants through word of mouth, or how do you end up finding your applicants?
At first, we got a lot of them through word of mouth. As we've grown and started to hire more like 20 or 25 people a year, we've had to be more proactive about that. So we have reached out to I guess we have 2 things. We've reached out outside of Chicago to all of the different schools and service providers and different organizations that work with people with disabilities. We go to the conferences, we send out requests for people, and we source a lot of people that way. We've also started experimenting with remote workers. First, we're focused on remote workers in Chicagoland. Chicago's big, so it's hard to get to our location, even if you live in the Chicago area for some people. But they can come in for a couple of weeks for training. So we're sort of trying it out with people local that can come in, get trained here, and then are working remote. Once we get kind of the bugs worked out of that, I think we'll broaden it to work with remote workers nationally. Because to the discussion earlier, even if we do set this up in major metros, there's a huge number of people who don't live in major metros and have autism and can contribute to an organization like this. So we want to be able to find a way to get them working as well.
Well, that's super exciting. Anything else you'd like to share about your future plans, or share with the marketing community?
Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting has been the different types of value that our our clients get out of working with us. Initially, I thought it would be, we're going to do great work, and it's really going to be a sort of a work for dollars kind of exchange, just like a traditional sort of service provider. But we found that our clients really get benefit in two other ways. First of all, in terms of their relationship with their employees. So today, autism is so prevalent that pretty much everybody is one degree of separation from autism. They've got a cousin, a brother, a neighbor, somebody they know with autism. And when a company contracts with us, they're sort of demonstrating to their employees that they care about this, that they care about purpose, that they care about people with autism, and has built very stronger relationships with their employees. And I've had a number of employees of our clients say that the best part of their job is working with AutonomyWorks because it gives them the ability to get work done, but also to make an impact. That's one place. The second place has been the impact that it has on our clients' clients. So we have a client we do production and operations work for, and they brought their client in. They were talking about the work they were doing, and they talked about AutonomyWorks, and the client thought that was really interesting. The client came to visit us at AutonomyWorks. Then the vendor, so our client was selected as because their relationship with AutonomyWorks was selected as one of the vendors of the year for that vendor, and then has now gotten sort of some special treatment in terms of how their relationships are with the clients. So that I think is really an interesting benefit that people get from working with a mission-oriented company like AutonomyWorks.
Yeah, that's a great story. So I appreciate you sharing all that, and I look forward to continuing to watch your ongoing success as you grow. And certainly, I'm looking forward to hearing about an announcement of maybe a Manhattan location or one of the boroughs.
Yeah, that'd be one of the first places we'd start, I'm sure.
Exactly, and perhaps if anyone who's a landlord who'd like to have the donate the space would probably help. For you, right?
Absolutely.
Get you started.
Particularly for getting started. Absolutely. Yeah. So Kevin, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Likewise.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.